Welcome to the Lightforge podcast. This is abou.
This is Merps. Hello. Another week, another interesting week. I will actually be talking about BGs this week. Although I don't know what order you want to do this in. We actually have a lot to talk about with BGs. Now, if you're asking Merps, are you playing BGs? Hell no, I'm not playing BGs. But we do have a lot to
now,
talk
now
about.
you're definitely not playing BGs. Um, yeah, okay. I didn't know we were going to go that deep into it, but yeah, let's. I have stuff to say about the BGs part too. Let's talk about Arena first. Nothing's changed. We're still waiting on whenever the hell the next patch comes in, because the next patch will hopefully get rid of this mage thing that really should have been gotten rid of in the first patch. Hopefully, it doesn't introduce that many new problems. Although, some classes do need help, right? Like, we're not in a. This isn't like a perfectly balanced meta outside of mage. Um, and if you just look at it from the percentages, mage doesn't even look all that problematic. 53.3%, that's not bad at all. Well, that's just how the mage gets to the 53.3%. That means it needs adjustment. But going down, druid is 45% win rate, which is pretty bad. But if you saw earlier, we took that thing to 12 wins. It's just, I think people play druid wrong. I don't think it's actually that bad. Shaman is at 45%. I think that's actually a problem. I think Shaman's a bit weak right now. I don't want it to be stronger, so I don't mind, but I can see that. Like, I think they're definitely going to buff that. Unfortunately, the current iteration of Shaman is it's terrible. It's not that it's no skill. It's just that the skill gets diluted so hard because of all the RNG you have to use, because that's where all of your power comes from. Yeah, it's Shaman always has this problem, but it's really amplified in this meta. So, I don't mind that it's at 45%, but it'll probably be knocked up, and it could be problematic. And then there's Rogue at 43% that they definitely have to pull up. And Rogue could become very powerful, because if you look at what the actual powerful classes are right now, outside of Mage, it's Paladin, Demon Hunter, Warrior, and then Hunter. Priest, which did not get nerfed, by the way, used to be number 3 and is now number 6. And that happened, one, because Hunter fell. But Hunter didn't even fall super far, right? Like, as you see. Priest fell because the meta shifted like we said it would. As more and more people realize what tempo means, that the tempo is a way to win this game, all the tempo classes seem to also be doing really well. What are the tempo classes in this game? It's Paladin, Demon Hunter, Warrior, Hunter. And sometimes Mage and sometimes Rogue, right? But Rogue is just bad right now. And Mage is good for other reasons. Possibly also tempo. You can't tell from the stats, though. So what we were talking about before, the whole stressing on tempo, on being tempo possible, on making sure you don't get screwed over by all the delayed tempo and that you use your tempo wisely, and that you're pushing, we get good results. I've gotten actually better results in this meta than probably any meta in the last year. With my style of play, which is just basics and fundamentals for tempo. Even though this meta, if you talk to people, everyone's like, it's such a crazy meta with these wild, crazy cards. I'm like, I don't see it that way. The crazy cards don't affect me because I'm playing a tempo game. And people are catching on to it, and people are playing like that, and the people who play like that get success rates with the classes that do that better than the other classes. So before this patch comes in and maybe upends everything, but I don't think it will. I think this will just remain a tempo meta that has good card advantage, and if the game goes on for too long and gets crazy, we're going to talk about the fundamental use of tempo. That's what I'm calling this topic for the arena part of this discussion. And that's because we're really back there. This is a continuation of last week's podcast, in that for whatever weird reason, and I could not have predicted this to this extent, and nobody predicted it to this extent, but we are in a meta in which the fundamentals of this game and your understanding of tempo matters more than I think at any time in the last 3 years of Hearthstone history, Hearthstone Arena history, which is crazy, because the game did get pretty crazy, and yet it all of a sudden started emphasizing this tempo game. And I think that's really thanks to the sets that they picked, right? Because the sets that they picked all manipulate tempo. with the corrupted, with the new set and the infused, and with all the endless card advantage of Skullomance. Like, it really puts tempo at the forefront of a lot of what you can actually control in this game. So step one is just a refresher of tempo, right? Like, we haven't done a deep dive into what the hell tempo means in years, because we just kind of assume you know what tempo means. But maybe you don't know what tempo means, or maybe you do know what tempo means, but it's always good to have a little refresher. But when we say tempo in Hearthstone Arena, what we always mean is stuff on the board, or stuff that you have banked up that will swing on the board. Like, for example, if you have Innervate in your hand, that is tempo. Doesn't matter if it's not doing anything on the board because it's in your hand. That is tempo that you have. You just haven't used it yet, right? If you have a card that is a 2-mana 4/4 and your opponent has a card that is a 2-mana 2/3, you have tempo over your opponent, even if neither card has been played. So you have tempo that's on the board and you have tempo that's in your hand. And what this meta does a lot is it increases tempo in your hand. That's what Corrupted is. That's what Infused is for the most part. Sometimes Infused draws cards or whatever, but you are now always in a position to manipulate tempo somehow, right? And that tempo is just this big ball of possibilities, because tempo doesn't win you any. There's no like, oh, I have 100 tempo, you have 80 tempo, therefore I win the game. That's not how tempo works. You win the game when you get your opponent down from 30 to 0. You win the game when your opponent runs out of cards and you're the only one that can do stuff. Those are the two ways that you actually can win the game. So if you're like talking to someone who's from the MTG world, tempo means face damage. Like, a fireball to the face is really good tempo. In Hearthstone Arena, nobody ever really says a fireball to the face is good tempo. We separate that out as reach. But in MTG, the concept of tempo is just ending the game faster. Whatever's ending the game faster is better tempo. If you're ending the game, you don't get to the point where your opponent has more cards and you don't have any cards, and then you lose, right? So tempo in Hearthstone Arena is this big ball possibility that can be translated into either face damage, which is that end the game concept that Magic the Gathering has, or it can be transferred into card advantage, or it can be transferred into protecting your own face. But that's not a huge part of this meta, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. So don't think of tempo as its own thing. Think of it as the ball of possibilities that'll get you more card advantage or more face damage. And what you do with your tempo when you play it, whether you go face or make the trades, determines what resource you get out of the tempo. And the fact that tempo can always get you either face damage or card advantage means that anytime that you can do anything, whether it's play over tempo cards or attack face or trade, you are making a decision that basically says, do I want more face damage or do I want more card advantage? And those decisions on almost every turn or multiple times in a turn stack up until you actually get quite a bit more card advantage by playing the card advantage route, or quite a bit more face damage and putting your opponents in awkward positions, or just pushing to end the game by going face. And the correct decision to do it each time is not the same, because you could start out tempo going face because that's your plan, and then realize, for example, that you actually are going to more likely win by card advantage, or just that you're unlikely to win, period, but the only way you can win is card advantage and not going to the face, and then you switch, right? Or it's the other way. You may have a strategy that I think is an inferior strategy in this meta, but it's still a strategy, and sometimes your deck just goes that way, right? Where you're trying to go for card advantage because you have these big bombs in the end, because you have a lot of taunts and you're just trying to get there, right? Like, you have the Ysera. Like, you need to get to the Ysera, or else Ysera is a terrible card, I keep saying, right? Because it is. But if you have a whole strategy that is to get the Ysera, and you're going to draw the Ysera at every single game at some point, then that's not a bad strategy at all. So you could start off get more card advantage as your strategy, because you may have the Ysera, but you need to draw enough cards and extend the game more enough to get to the Ysera, right? Like, you may not just have endless card advantage. The card advantage thing is weird, right? Because if you actually have a ton of card advantage, your playing strategy is not to get more card advantage, because you already have infinite card advantage, right? Like, playing to get more card advantage is totally worthless. So you have to be in that middle zone where you can plausibly win the game with card advantage, but you need more. Then you do the card advantage route. But even if that is your normal game plan, you could get to the point where you're like, oh no, I need to hit face because my opponent just like, I don't know, drew 10 cards or whatever. Like they played Iyasera. All of a sudden your strategy shifts, right? Like those are the two divergent uses of tempo, and at each point, which part you take. It's usually just one binary decision, right? And then you layer risk analysis on top of it. But which part you take is hugely important to winning this meta. So the decks you draft have to be tempo possible, because you can definitely draft decks in this meta that are not tempo possible. And if you have decks that are not tempo possible, then you're not going to be able to make this decision in most of your games, which means your skill is not going to have an impact in those games, the same way as if you drafted a tempo possible deck. So if you're a good player, always draft a tempo possible deck. And if possible, always draft a card advantage possible deck. The hunter that we were talking about last week that hasn't gone up yet, but will be on YouTube on Monday, so that's tomorrow from when we're recording this, we were a super aggressive hunter deck, but we won at least one game, if not two games, on card advantage. Because at a certain point, you looked at it and you're like, hey, they're legitimately more aggro than we are, and we have some good opportunities to get some card advantage here. And because we're in this meta with these cards available from Skullomance and whatever, you're going to end up with some cards in your deck that just get you more cards. So if you get those cards early, if you realize your opponent has played 10 cards and has played no cards that generated any extra cards, you can feel pretty good about your card advantage and you can switch in that way. But generally, like, you want to draft both tempo possible and card advantage possible. And if you're drafting tempo possible, the card advantage possible part in this meta will probably just happen naturally. But keep an eye out, right? You don't want to like have like only like 2 cards that generate or draw another card in your entire deck and 5 1-drops. You're committing a little too hard at that point. So that's my tips on play and draft.
I think it's always the emphasis on tempo possible. And for anybody who is still wondering what that is about, um, we're not saying that you need to put all of your chips into that basket. As in, you need to try to draft aggro. It's like, oh, should I take this Onyx Mage Scribe or should I take this Wriggling Horror? I mean, depending on what your deck is, go ahead and take that Mage Scribe. It's fine. You just want to make sure that the curve fits, right? The curve fits in order to, number one, be tempo possible. And number two, just stop people like Adwicta from killing you, right? Because you will see those decks, you will see those times, or the hunters that still have like a couple of wild seeds, right?
Yeah.
You got to be able to fight that
Remember,
off.
after Mage, your top 3 classes are Paladin, Demon Hunter, Warrior. They are all tempo possible classes, so you're going to face them.
Yep, definitely. So I think that this is very important, and it's nice because it is skill testing, right? It's a balancing thing. If we were just telling you, dude, draft 6 Mage Scribes and draft as big as possible, we're not in that like 4 mind controls beats 3 mind controls, like I'm talking as if mind control is still a card. It's not a card, but it's definitely not that. So balance it out. You still want your draws, right? You still want your combos, but you got to be able to balance it out. And any sort of meta that requires you to balance this stuff out should be, I mean, it is skill testing. I'm not saying you won't get tilted because you're going to get hit by a Sire Denathria sometimes, in which there was not really much you could do.
You could have won the game before turn 10.
Assuming that you, like, could, right? Because sometimes you just can't. And then the game is in play, and then, so yeah.
Yeah, but to be fair, a turn 10 Sire Daenerys is not that bad. Like, even if they had it since their opening hand, like, it's not that backbreaking. And if they, didn't get it until halfway through the game, then not even good. So yeah, I mean, this is the meta we're in. I don't know. I can't say that I like super enjoy it, but I do enjoy it. I think it's an overall enjoyable meta. I don't think it's overall the most enjoyable meta, but it is overall, I think, a very, like, relative to similar to the metas we've gotten since December at least. It's one of the higher skill metas when you have a not total trash deck and not totally amazing deck, which is about as good as you're gonna get these days. I don't see it being much better than this, because if you get total trash decks, it with the power differences that's going to exist in pretty much every single wild rotation that we see, it's just gonna suck. Like, that's just what's gonna happen. And there will always be times where you go 0-3 or 1-3 or whatever, no matter how good of a player you are, even with a decent deck, because the swings and the craziness is just in the game now. Those cards exist, right? They're not banning all, like, I don't know, 50 cards that could cause gigantic swings in the game.
Yep.
So this is as good as it gets.
I think, yeah, and by as good as it gets, no, it's true, because we're going to see, like, it's it's foolhardy to believe that, like, they're going to take away all Sire Denathrius-esque cards, right? Puzzle box-esque cards, in addition to kind of printing more of them, right? Like, you're going to have more Sire Denathrius printed. That's just the way it is. So expect that. But I absolutely agree with you. This is kind of the best case scenario where you have this balancing act. So play it, and I don't know, like, the advice that you always give is, like, just don't think about it. If you get hit by Sire, just don't think about it, right? Yeah. Which is not the best advice, but
yeah, there was a game on Friday night's run where we got totally wrecked by Cycle of Hatred. We, like, played into it, and then we got totally wrecked by Cycle of Hatred. We're talking, like, wiped our board, wiped their board, generated like 6/3/3s. We lost on turn 5. Like, we lost the game as soon as Cycle of Hatred came out, or whatever turn Cycle of Hatred comes out. And I was like, yep, that's the game. We made every correct move, including playing really hard into Cycle of Hatred, because given our deck and given the cards that we had in our hand, there was no way to play around Cycle of Hatred and stand a good chance of winning. And the chances that our opponent had Cycle of Hatred at that turn was low. That is not a 50% chance. That is not even a 25% chance. That was like a 15% chance at best. And that means every Demon Hunter we face, we will have a 15% chance to lose on the spot on the turn Cycle of Hatred can come out. And that's just the game. So when these things happen, don't start playing around Cycle of Hatred. At least not at any cost to your game plan. But also, don't get tilted by it. Like, just move on. It's not just freeze mage, right?
Just don't get tilted.
Yeah,
just don't get tilted.
Because beforehand. This isn't like I think I get tilted way more by things that I don't know coming beforehand, with the exception of Mothership. It's just like, oh my god, how could they have possibly done that? What the heck? What am I supposed to do? But if it's like kind of like a bug in the game almost that they're not even going to fix because it's just part of the game, you're like, okay, that's just what it is. They play this, they win. Mothership was especially tilting because I thought it was a bug they should have fixed, and they kept repeatedly not fixing it for a bit. Until they eventually fixed it, and then eventually the pool got diluted. Like I said, I don't even think Mothership in a lot of metas is anywhere near that bad. It was just that first meta when they had only strong mechs. It was just like, this card is super overpowered, and it was like everywhere. It had an offering bonus. Anyway, if you see freeze mages do freezy stuff, don't get tilted, you're gonna lose. Sometimes you win, right? They're not 100%. There's some RNG involved. Sometimes you luck out. Sometimes you have the perfect draw. Sometimes they like miss their turn 4, right? Or whatever. And you win. But you're going to lose most of the time, but it's fine. If you get wrecked by the ridiculous stuff that you're like, I guess they have a 15% chance of having it, but I can't possibly get a read on it or do anything intelligent about it. And if they have it, they win. But let them win. You know what happens if you lose 15% of your games in the arena? I don't do the math, but I'm pretty sure you're going to average like 10, 12 wins? You may average 12 wins. I don't know. You're going to average a very high win rate if you only lose 15% of the times. And 15% is about the ridiculous non-mage stuff that you could potentially see for each card. So that's not your problem, right? Like, yes, it's affecting this run's win rate, but on your overall win rate, those cards and those times when it happens, that 15% subtraction compared to like a perfectly skilled game or whatever, or like a moderately skilled game with only variances that are acceptable to skilled players, it's not that big of a deal. Like think about it this way. Back in the day when there were like let's say a quarter of the amount of these kinds of cards, a quarter, just a quarter. The top players got what, like 9 wins per run, like literally top leaderboard players, which means that they probably got eight. Let's just say 8.5 wins per run. If they were for their non-leaderboard ones, right? Because the leaderboard always spikes high because it's your top 30 runs. You know what? Let's just say 8 wins. Let's just say 8 wins if you just play the top classes. Be really conservative about it. Now we're going to subtract it not by 15%, but let's subtract it by like 12% because there was ridiculous stuff before too. So we're going to multiply that by 0.88. So you should now be able to win 7 wins per run. The best players used to be able to win 8, now they can win 7. That's fine. Like, I don't know. If I'm getting 7 wins per run, I'm not unhappy. I'm not saying this game has no skill whatsoever, right? I mean, no skill whatsoever would be like a little over 3 wins per run. Because you just take away all the times your opponent's DC on you or whatever. But like 7 wins per run, that's still quite skilled. Your skill is still making a quite significant impact. You just got to write it off.
I agree. I think it's pretty consistent with what we've been talking about. And honestly, I think we're just waiting for a change to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like something to happen. Because they didn't change enough. As in mages are a little bit still annoying. Can we just get the location gone? Like we just need the location gone. It is one of the most infuriating cards to play against, period, in the history of Arena. As in, they drop it on turn 3, and you guys saw during my first stream back in like months. I mean, I was playing Rogue, which is the worst class, right? So look, a lot of things are going to beat me. We still got to 6 wins. It was fine, but a mage drops it on turn 3. I'm like, okay, we lost. It's not hyperbole. We just lose, right? Because I'm trying to play aggressive. And
Yep.
what's even more important is if you're talking about a tempo possible meta, that card single-handedly locks it down.
Yep.
And that just really sucks.
That card makes any tempo possible deck tempo impossible.
Right. Whenever you are trying to do something like that, that just really sucks. It's kind of the same reason that Watch Post was removed, and it was so oppressive. With Watch Post, you could quote unquote remove it, but not really. Like 5 health on turn 3, or even later on, 5 health is pretty annoying. And it like Watch Post, at least you could remove. Here, what are you gonna do? You got the 4-drop that kills the location. No, you're not gonna have that. So you just let it happen, right? And if the response is, well, okay, just kill them, you can't. Like that's what the location does.
Yes.
It prevents the opponent from killing you. It slows down the game by so many turns. It's not possible at that time. So I really do think that, look, I know people have complained about like this card or that card or whatever. I think the mage location fits a lot of the criteria that we have seen for banned cards. So Blizzard, if you're out there, you're probably not listening to this, but please take it away. I think it would just be very, very helpful. Mages can be strong in other ways. Mages winning through Puzzle Box is so much more acceptable than mages winning through the location.
Yeah. The priest location is also bad, but at least you get to play the game. Like, the win rates of the priest location versus their other top cards is about as bad as the Mage Nightcloak Sanctum over their top cards. Not really, because you can't really count like Deathborn as an okay card, or really Puzzle Box as a remotely okay card. So Nightcloak Sanctum is at 63.7% win rate, and I'm gonna take Code Case as their first amazing card that should be like not removed from the game. That's at 60%. So they're 3.7% over what should be basically allowed. And Priest, Cathedral of Atonement, is at 58.7%. And their first card that should be allowed to be in the game is probably Draconic Studies at 56.8%. So that's 2%. So that's not. It's more a feeling thing for me for Mage. It's just between that and Deathborn, it just feels so bad. But the location when it drops on 3 is incredibly toxic. You do just lose the game, and I think they have to nerf it. I don't care if this is the set for locations and they want to promote locations. It's just not an okay card to have in the arena, and it has like Merps was saying, right? It's not even about how powerful it is. It's about what it does to you. And what it does to you is just not what we should allow in the arena. You can't have a single card be Freeze Mage.
It's two things. It's what it actually does, the disproportionate impact that it has for its mana cost, and it's about how it makes people feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Blizzard has, like, you kind of have to hit all of these things. For example, the what was it? The Hunter mount, right? Like that didn't even hit as many buckets or like check marks as this card does, because it's not something that is automatically on turn 3. Oh, I just play it. Like I just put it down. Like you can't, right? If you don't have a minion, you can't do that. Now, of course, it's very good even later on, just like how this card is very good later on. But this is much more independent than Ramming Mount ever was, and Ramming Mount, I think everybody universally was like, "Oh yeah, we have to ban it." It was banned not that quickly, not as quickly as everyone wanted it to, but I think as we move on, we know what has to be banned. So let's just ban the mage location.
Yeah, we've gone what? We've gone almost a month with this thing. Like at the absolute latest. So first you got to nerf the offering rate at the very least, just for the whole mage pack, and not just location, Deathborn too. But like when the rotation happens at the latest, gotta ban it. Gotta ban this card. Or nerf it so it's effectively banned. But at that point, just ban it. Like I don't know. Okay. That's the arena talk. A little bit of a meta wrap up. A little bit talk about tempo, and I hope you guys have a good time in this meta, or at least an okay time in this meta. It's really a good meta for practicing fundamentals, which is weird to say. I never thought I'd say that again. That it is a good meta for practicing fundamentals. I thought that era was just kind of over in Hearthstone, and then magically we get this meta where it's just all about tempo. You have to have a very advanced understanding of tempo to make your way through this meta, because it's not just like Yeti, Croc, right, and that they're super important. There's a lot of fancy tempo stuff going on, but most of it is tempo. Like all the delayed tempo stuff, not just on your side, but anticipating your opponent's delayed tempo stuff. Like what I see a lot of people get really frustrated on, and I see it in chat too whenever this happens, is my opponent plays a giant tempo turn, and then chat's like, oh my god, so broken, so whatever, and then like the vast majority of times we win anyway, and then chat's like, oh my god, I can't believe you came back from that, and I'm like, okay, but we come back from this most of the time, because guess what we also have? We also have been saving up our tempo cards, or we only got ahead because we had been using our tempo cards, and now we have our like big bomb cards that we haven't even spent yet. Like we have resources too. Our opponents have resources. Like let them use it. Whenever our opponent plays something that's either been corrupted or especially that's been infused, I'm generally okay with it. Like that, like those the paladin cards, the druid cards, the hunter cards that you infuse, and then you get like a bunch of big bodies from the warlock card as well, where you just get like an extra 3/3 on the board, right? Or like you get 6 more stats for a 3 drop that you should. You're like, oh my god, this is freaking crazy. If they come out on curve, it's kind of hard, but especially if they come out off curve and they have had to work for it by waiting, you can look at it as, oh, they got 6 more tempo than they should have on this turn. That's a lot. I'm screwed. Or you can look at it as saying they've lost tempo in previous turns, and now they're getting some of that tempo back, if not like getting a bonus on it, right? Because they played it well or they like met the conditions. So instead of them just getting 6 free tempo because this card is busted, they've probably sacrificed 2 to 3 tempo, and now they're getting 6 tempo 4 turns later. Or 3 turns later or whatever, and so the 6 extra tempo, all the extra tempo of the card is kind of just worthless. And if you think about it that way, you realize that, I mean, these cards are still really good, but this is not the same as the kind of swings that you're even used to. Because in your head, you're used to swings now where it's like he played Abyssal Enforcer or a Cycle of Hatred. Your board is gone. He has, or like Deathborn, right? Your board is gone. He's got like 30 Tempo on his side, and you're gonna lose, right? You're used to that. And when that happens, you're like, oh no, but like you're used to it, and you're so used to it. And this kind of thing has been happening really since, I think Abyssal Enforcer was the first one, that put a big thing on the board and got rid of your opponent's board. And you're just so used to it because you've been around the game for so long that you don't think twice about it. But that is way, way bigger of a tempo swing than what seems like a bigger tempo swing now. Because the tempo swings in this meta that happen, your opponent has already worked for it. So maybe you get less tilted by it. I know it makes me less tilted when I think about what my opponent had to have suffered in order to get there, right? That's also why I don't get that tilted when Ysera comes. Especially if it's a hard Ysera, like it was just in their deck. I'm like, when did this Ysera get in his hand? Oh, like 5 turns ago? Okay, I've already got 5 turns of tempo value on him. Now he gets a Ysera. Fine, right? Like, it's good. He made it to Ysera, he used it, it did stuff. But I beat Ysera the vast majority of times that Ysera's dropped on me. I don't even know how many Yseras I beat that are just stuck in people's hands. Because that's the cost. And the cost comes in all sorts of the tempo cost. And you got to factor that in when you're trying to get tilted or whatever. I don't think it like helps you play the game because what matters is what tempo they got, right? But it helps you understand the game better. And that should just, and understanding will help you play the game one way or the other, right? Like later on, making more nuanced or sophisticated decisions or whatever. But I'm not saying there's like a direct link for like understanding how your opponent got the tempo and like being able to turn that into more wins, like in a very direct way. But it does help you understand the game at a higher level.
Yep.
All right, that's it for
Nothing to
Arena.
add there.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Let's talk about Battlegrounds.
Boy.
Stuff has happened in Battlegrounds. Stuff has happened. Why don't you talk about the upcoming changes to Battlegrounds?
All right, so guys, look. Patch notes are out. There's going to be new heroes. There's going to be a lot of things in the game, but it doesn't matter. We're only going to talk about one thing, okay? We're only going to talk about
It's the only thing anyone cares about.
Is the only thing people actually care about, and that is BG's has gone pay to win. You heard that correct.
Money,
That's what
money.
everybody is saying. Okay, so this was announced earlier
Merps,
this
how
week.
much for a legendary gem in BG's? Max it.
100K. Easy.
Oh,
right?
oh.
I mean, look, pay to win. All right, look. I want to talk about exactly what's going on. I want to give my thoughts, and I want to talk about the reaction from others as well, because I think a lot of this is very interesting in a few ways. As to what's going on, BG's is going to transition from a free-to-play model, as in you can use gold to buy the pass in order to get 4 hero choices, to one in which you have to, per season, pay $15. Although it's $15 to buy virtual currency, and then that virtual currency buys the pass. Yeah, there's like a little in-between step in order to get 4 heroes. If you do not use real money, you cannot get 4 hero choices. You are stuck with 2 hero choices. That's the way going forward.
In case you haven't played BGs in a long time, you don't remember how bad it is. Having 2 hero choices is bad compared to having 4 hero choices.
So that's it going forward. Like, you guys can be unhappy about it. It is for the time being not going to change from that.
So how much is that? That's like less than $4. Oh wait, it's less than $4 a month.
It's
before tax.
Yeah, because it's $45 per year.
$45 per year. Okay, per year. So yeah, okay.
Yep.
So it's less than $1 per week.
Yes, it's less than $1 per week, which is an interesting way to look at it as well, right? But look, people are understandably angry, frustrated. A lot of content creators have spoken out against it. If you go to Bob's Tavern, the subreddit, a lot of people are very angry. Now, here is something that I think they really, really, really messed up in that the explaining that Blizzard did, if you can call it explanation, what they did essentially was say, hey, this isn't about power, and we want to minimize, the power considerations here, and we want to make it more about optionality. Gosh, I wish they didn't say that.
No, like, what does that mean? Like, okay, I generally understand where developers come from stuff, having been a developer, and just generally, like, I like to see things from all people's point of views. I still don't understand what they mean by that.
What
And they
they mean
explained it a
is
lot too, and I
no,
still
no,
don't get it.
because if you look at the context from it, they say we want to reassure you we are going to keep, and because of the extra, capital, we are going to focus on balancing such that whatever perceived huge advantage you see, it's actually not as bad. It's going to be more about optionality. Now, what does this remind you of? If any, first of all, you should just be like, WTF. Second of all, Adwokta, I'll talk to you for a second. You
Uh-huh.
remember 2 years ago when we teamed up with PJ and Victor, or 12
Mm-hmm.
wins, to show Blizzard that 4 stacking in high
Yep.
MMR lobbies was extraordinarily unfair.
Mm-hmm.
And if they
We
had kept
dominated.
that, Victor dominated.
Yeah, okay. Victor
You
dominated.
you did
We
some
did
interesting
things.
you did some interesting things. I still remember that. That was but even then, Victor gained a ton of MMR. I gained some MMR. I think you gained
I gained
some,
some
right?
MMR
Yeah,
too.
you gained
Like,
some.
more than I would
Um,
have otherwise without this
all of us did.
strat.
All of us did.
Yeah,
We
all
all
of
we
us did.
all went
And
up.
we didn't even funnel stuff to Victor. We played it straight.
We
We
didn't
all
funnel.
tried to win. Victor was just much better than us, so clearly he was going to win more. But we could
We didn't
have
feed
thrown.
him.
Yeah, we could have
Yeah,
fed
yeah.
him
We didn't
and
feed
gotten
him.
him even more MMR, right?
Yep. So what happened then was Blizzard through TN put out a post that was like, "Hey, look, we understand, but the advantage isn't as big as you think it is. It's not that big. It's only a few percentage points, which they messed up then, they messed up now, because immediately, you smart listeners out there who are either listening to this live or recorded, you understand it is not about the percentage, it is about the difference in power. And for Blizzard, you can't go to a person and say, I know what you are thinking is big, and trust me, you are wrong. It is smaller than you think. It completely misses the point because this game is about eking out those small
Mm-hmm.
advantages, right? Understanding this curve. This one roll can make a difference. And there are going to be big differences. So even in your scenario where you tighten up all these heroes, you never tighten them up to a point in which it literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Where, in certain metas, like a Shutterwalk has the same win rate as a Pyramid,
No, that's
right?
just
Like it just
like,
never
I don't
happens.
understand. That's what I mean when I say I don't understand the post. Because for that logic to actually work, Blizzard has to think that because they have more money, and I don't even know how much more money this is going to bring them, but because of whatever incremental amount of more money this is going to get them, they are now able to achieve near perfect balance in Battlegrounds that they could not before. And what was missing on why they couldn't achieve anywhere near perfect balance among its heroes before was money. But, like, that is, it's not that that's tone deaf, it's that if any developer on Hearthstone's Battlegrounds' balance team approved that statement rather than fighting tooth and nail, I don't even mean like passively sat there and says, well, I don't think that really works, but whatever. I mean like fighting tooth and nail to change that statement. If not every single balance developer at Blizzard was doing that, was fighting tooth and nail to change that statement, and they just got overruled by like whatever, like publicity team or whatever to like, say it that way, like they should be fired. Because it is your job as a balance developer to one, be able to admit that you cannot perfectly balance the game, and two, to make sure that nobody thinks you can perfectly balance the game. They didn't just not do that. They went a step further and said the reason we are charging you more money is that we can now perfectly balance the game. That's so.
Look,
I have to think
I don't look.
that
I
it
don't
didn't
know.
go through the developers at all, and that this was just what the PR team was doing, and it may have gone through like a developer, right? But not like a developer that's actually responsible for balance. Because this is just such a stupid statement if it was taken at face value. So you can't take it at face value, right? This is like one of those things where it's like, it's too absurd to have actually been thought out, so it couldn't have been thought out.
I think that this is an unfortunate message, and because I don't want to kind of like take away all of the good things and progress that we've seen from just Hearthstone in general. This is, I think, very disappointing, right? This is very disappointing for casual players because, and also, I am one of those would be casual players. Like, even though I used to be high leaderboard, high legend, whatever, I will not come back on a casual basis because I don't want to pay and then not use it, right? So it's tough for me. I know that my barrier to entry is a lot higher. Um, and at the same time, for a lot of content creators I know are either frustrated or frustrated plus worried about all of this because they know that like sort of the lifeline and the root of BGs is getting cut right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm frustrated with that message. Now, I don't know what the devs had or had not like what sort of hand they had in this. I'm sure that a lot of them are having a tough time right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that looking at okay, I want to go back to the statement you made. You're like it's less than $1 per week,
Yeah.
right? And that's true. And
The
I want
amount
to
they're
focus on
charging
that.
is so little, by the way.
It's
It's
so little.
so little.
So we have this kind of clash here. And earlier this week, I don't want to get into all of this drama because we're not like a drama podcast. Also, Hearthstone drama tends to be weird.
Drama.
But there
No, yeah, much
was,
to brand new's disappointment, we don't
I
talk a
know,
lot about drama.
but there was discussion between Zeddy and Kibler about BGs becoming pay to win. I don't look, I didn't follow the entire thing. I'm going to summarize it a little bit, not as in what happened, but I think the point that was sort of missed by Zeddy, because I feel for Kibler and what he's talking about. And I think Zeddy can be a little overzealous sometimes, just a little bit. Uh, Kibler brought up this interesting point, which is going to the statement that you made, which
Mm-hmm.
is I think we have to be really careful about using the term pay to win
Yep.
because pay to win has been corrupted and tainted by mobile games.
Mm-hmm.
Diablo Immortal,
Yeah,
right?
we
If
play
you
Diablo Immortal hardcore. We pay good money for Diablo Immortal. We have very little power relative to people we face in Diablo Immortal. But Diablo Immortal is unashamedly pay to win.
it is pay to win. If you pay $1,000. Your character is definitely more powerful than somebody who didn't pay.
Mm-hmm.
If you paid 20, 30,000, you are way more powerful than the person who paid nothing, the person who paid 1,000, the
Yeah.
person who paid 5,000. Yes, like you are more powerful. So and then Diablo Immortal still isn't as bad as some other mobile games, right? Some other mobile games
Yes.
are even
Well,
more pay to
so
win.
so by that we mean Diablo Immortal gives you very little power compared to the money you put in. Not that Diablo Immortal doesn't charge you more than the other mobile games. Diablo Immortal charges you way more than other mobile games, but the amount of power as a percentage of a free to play player that you get based on what you pay is much lower. But they let you pay way more.
Yeah, so this is well, there are also other games that actually, that actually try and succeed in having people sink in like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there is that. But the difference, what Kibler was essentially saying is like, I think we have to be careful using this term pay to win because this is the lowest payment
Mm-hmm.
for having access to more power that there basically could possibly be with no additional options to
Yep.
pay for power
Yep.
effectively. Um, and he basically says we should be careful using this term because the term pay to win is anchored down by the Diablo Immortals, the other, let's say, a lot of Asian mobile games, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's weighed down a lot by those. So we should be careful. And if we are talking about a game that is struggling, they looked at all of these options. I don't love it, but like the people who crunch the numbers are like, we need this actual infusion of cash through this method. Kibler is basically saying like this is not pay to win. It is a pay to play. It is a
Yes,
pay
it's paid to
some,
play. Mm-hmm.
pay a little actually to play, and if you play a lot, it is actually really worth it for you. In effect, it doesn't
If you
affect
play
you
a
at
tiny
all.
bit, it is really worth it to you. Like, if you are not totally broke, a
Yes.
dollar a week for a game that you play at all is nothing.
Yep.
It is
So,
nothing. Economically speaking, and I'm going to be very clear about this. I know there may be people who are really poor out there who are going to be offended by this, but it is nothing. What Blizzard is charging you to play Battlegrounds is effectively $0. You, plus everybody else who's paying the $1 a week, will add up to a good amount of money that Blizzard can use to hire an extra person for some resources or whatever, but you are playing what was a rounding error of nothing. That is the whole plan and the whole pitch behind this. And it was messaged terribly. And also, people in gaming are extremely sensitive about getting charged money for something that they had for free, even if the amount of money is completely trivial. Even if there's a cap on the amount of money that they can spend on it, so that there's no way anybody can get super powerful. Like, what people in Diablo Immortal complain about isn't that they have to pay to play the game, right? What they complain about is that Diablo Immortal is actually pay to win, right? You can pay $30,000 and you will be more powerful than if you paid $300. And if you're a Diablo Immortal player, you may think, hey, I'll pay $60 for this game, but I can't. That's not an option. Because if I pay 60, someone pays 30,000, I'm still super like weak compared to them, and that's not how I want to play my game, right? It's not fun for me. Like, totally fair. That's what a pay to win game like is, and that's what it feels like. You have to be okay with it when you sign up for it. That's not Battlegrounds. This is just a payment system. You can think of it as, here's a demo mode where you're just going to be less powerful and we're limiting you, and you can do that for free. But if you want to actually play the game, you got to pay $1 a week. And if this was just how the game is, nobody would say anything about how much they're charging, because they are heavily undercharging Battlegrounds. Like, it's not that Battlegrounds could not be cheaper. It's more that they could legitimately charge you like $5 a week for Battlegrounds and still have a good amount of players. And they're choosing not to do that, partly probably because they were literally free, and it's hard to make any kind of incremental jump. But I don't know why they're not doing that, honestly. Like, I think if I were corporate at Blizzard and I was managing this, I would have charged at least $3 a week, probably $5 a week, easily. And I would have just dealt with the player loss. But maybe that's why I'm not a corporate at Blizzard, right? Maybe that's why that's not my job. And I make terrible decisions based on it. But what they have decided to do is charge you nothing for the game, but make you pay for it. It's this weird thing that's going to make nobody happy. And I don't know. I think it's a bad decision, but I also think that I think Kibler's entirely right. Like, honestly, like
me too.
the backlash against Kibler, like having like, I don't know, betrayed the players or doing whatever. Like, I don't know. Maybe everybody really is that poor, but I can't believe it. Like, as a poor broke student who grew up on free lunches at the age of 14, like working like, you know, odd jobs for like, and my parents didn't pay for anything. I had to like literally buy my own food. I had weird parents. Like, I had a nice house, but like I didn't have food. And Merps can attest to the fact that I did not have food. At that stage, I could have afforded to play this game. Not if I really wanted to, I could afford to play this game. But I could just afford to play this game without thinking twice about it.
Yep.
So you're being charged
I'm
effectively no money.
because you've been going on and on about remember at the beginning, this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So I'm going to differentiate for a second, and this is why we brought it up. Because I think Kibler is 100% right in that the cost of this is basically nothing. At the same time, because some of you I see in Twitch chat have already forgotten, we have stated at the beginning, we think this is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Both statements can be true.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I think the community can be missing here. Because it feels like a lot of people are thinking that they have to argue. It's like either Kibler is right, and this is fine, right? Like the devs and sorry, not the devs, whoever made this decision is doing the right thing, or you have to argue that like, man, Kibler, you're a effing sell. I have seen the replies that Kibler has gotten.
People are killing him.
No, people are killing him.
Oh
it's
my
ridiculous.
God.
But I think he is 100% right in that there should be a differentiation. You should also be thinking of it in a different way, but that can still make this decision, in my opinion, a terrible decision.
Sure.
So let's put down the pitchforks for a second, because I'm gonna face you went on way too long about like a lot.
No, because I don't care. It's totally separate for me because it's illogical to connect the two. Whether it's a terrible corporate decision or whether it's it's a fair or like okay or like I don't know, like not. What do they keep using for Diablo Immortal? What was that word? Terrible word.
What?
It's the word that people keep using to describe. It's a meaningless word that they use to describe Diablo Immortal's monetization system a lot. I'm struggling to like think of it. It's like evil, but not evil. It's just like a moral
predatory?
word. Yeah, predatory. That word. Like, this is just so far. Like, this is not clearly the Hearthstone Battlegrounds is not predatory. You can't like spend more than $5 for every 4 months. Like, you're not predating on anything the way an actual pay-to-win game can do that. But it triggers people in this very, very weird way associated with money, and I think that's entirely separate from whether it's a good decision to go to this pricing model or not, right? Because whether it's a good decision to go to a pricing model, really a lot of it is, well, how much money can you get from it, right? If you get a lot of money from it, then it's a good pricing model. If you get a lot of money from it and retain players, then it's an even better pricing model, right? But number one for doing a pricing model is how much money you're going to get. So was it a good decision? Well, obviously not, because they're not going to get a lot of money from it, and they're going to lose a ton of players. Like, it's obviously a terrible thing. But who determines whether it's terrible? It's not math that determined it's terrible. Math-wise, it was probably really good. What determined it was terrible is public sentiment and how people do it, right? So I don't want to talk about that side for me, right? Because one, I don't understand people probably on that level. But also, two, people are wrong. And we can talk about like I understood that was a terrible model before like even I saw any reactions. I'm just like, this is silly. And I could predict what the reaction was, which makes it a really terrible model if I could even do that. But setting that aside, I really want to focus on like why people care. Like, I see someone in chat's like, well, you could end up paying $150 for it if you play the game for 5 years. Okay, why are you not willing to pay $150 for a game you played for 5 years? Why is that so weird? Why is video games the thing that we love the most? I literally decided to move to this country at the age of 7, 8 because of video games. Like, that's how important video games is to me. And this is like, I choose to do the stream and the podcast and whatever.
You didn't choose.
I chose.
You wished. You like.
No. I had the choice. I was given the choice in the divorce of where I was going to be, and I literally chose this country because I had better video games. And it wasn't even American video games, right? It was Japanese video games that China didn't have access to at the time, at the same pace that America had access to. But that's a whole other story. My point is, that's how important video games is to me and my life. And I get that not everybody is at this level of commitment to video games, but we're all listening to this podcast, and we're all like playing Hearthstone because we like Hearthstone, because we like video games. So even if you don't love video games that way, why do people insist on paying video games on an hour per entertainment basis at pennies to what they pay for other entertainment? I don't understand that. Like, I understand it if you don't really like video games. If you're like, oh, this is okay, but I really prefer to watch a movie. Movies are my thing. Video games are just like a kind of a side thing. Like, fine, you shouldn't pay as much for a video game as a movie. You shouldn't even pay close to it. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not that person, right? It's hard for me to like put myself in the shoes of someone who likes movies that much more than video games because one is interactive. Anyway, my point is, I mean, I believe both are art, all that, but my point is, for a bunch of video game fanatics, video game addicts, video game connoisseurs and appreciators, people struggle to pay basic things like $1 an hour for their entertainment, or in this case, like $0.01 an hour. More than a cent, maybe like 10 cents an hour for their entertainment. And they're like, I cannot pay. This is immoral even, right? Or like Blizzard's gone off the deep end if they expect me to pay 10 cents an hour for my entertainment. This is silly. This is so terrible. Like, why would a company ever do this? How greedy are you that you will charge 10 cents an hour to entertain me? Like, that you will take 10 cents from me every single freaking hour that I play this game. That's unbelievable. Like, we should have laws to make sure you can't do that. I'm going to tell all my friends that they should not do this too, because this is just a terrible, terrible thing that you're doing here. Like, it becomes a moral, ethical, identity-based. Like, you don't get this fiery if someone's trying to give you a bad deal, right? You just go like, okay, no. Moving on, right? Like, you can offer bad deals every day. There's a million things you could be doing. You're not doing a lot of them because they're not worth it to you money-wise. Like, frankly, like, assuming you have any kind of budget, you're not filthy rich. Like, this is, but when it comes to video games, it's this really weird dynamic. And I think it has to be something like historical with the development of video games. Because it is not math. It is not economics. The math and the economics 1 bajillion% favor Blizzard's model. In fact, Blizzard's charging way too little. So all it is feelings. And it is illogical feelings. And it is not like a rich person versus poor person thing either. Blizzard's charged the least amount absolutely possible. This is just I feel weird if I have to pay money for video games, especially on a subscription basis, and even more if it's on an endless actual pay-to-win basis like Diablo Immortal, right? And that's just a illogical feeling. That's my position. I think that is just people whose feelings are out of touch with logic, and their feelings, objectively speaking, are wrong. I'm not saying they don't feel it, I'm saying they're wrong. And they're getting in the way of their own fun. Because they're going to go out now and spend more money on something that's less fun, rather than spend less money on something that's more fun. And that's just them harming themselves. And that's why it's illogical.
Okay. Now that you are done with... You spent way too much time just doing your examples. I'm going to completely disagree with one aspect of what you're saying. I don't think it's illogical. Because I don't think... So, first of all, you don't follow the BG scene at all.
No.
Right? Like, at all.
No.
Right. So, you thinking that it is illogical, I understand why you think that. I think that the response here, taking out the part about people attacking Kibler, because I think that is unreasonable, I think people having this very strong feeling against it, you need to not look at it, in my opinion, like them responding to, oh, you have to pay $45 a year / less than $1 a week for content that you enjoy. This is just another stepping stone, although a very big one, in a worrisome decline that they see from a game mode that
right, so the slippery slope argument.
It's not just a slippery slope. They see this as a death blow of a sort. For not just them, but for what the game could be. Could be. They see
what could the game be?
Wait, what did you just say?
What could the game be? You said it's a death blow for what the game could be. What could the game be?
What could be is growing, better player base. Like, they see it, whether it'll happen or not.
Okay, so it's cyclical.
We don't know.
So the player base is declining because people are illogical. And because people are illogical, the player base is going to decline. And so it's a bad decision. So you can't charge people money because people will illogically not. So everything I say stands. You're just agreeing with me, except that you're saying that the people are illogical. You can't change people being illogical. And so you have to take that into account when you make decisions, which I agree with.
No. Why are people illogical in assuming that this will hurt hurt the player base and hurt the
No, I'm not saying they're
momentum of
illogical in doing that. I'm saying, but the reason it hurts the player base is because those players are illogical. So I need to position myself based on how other people will react. But it's still based on other people being illogical is how they will react, right? Like, if other people aren't willing to pay a buck, look, you're saying the player base will decline because people will not pay a buck a week for this game. I've established that paying a buck a week for this game, not playing just because you're going to have to pay a buck a week for this game is illogical. So you're saying I could be totally logical and feel like this is bad for the game and this is the death of the game because I know other people, lots of other people, the majority of other people are going to be illogical in their analysis, and that's going to cause actual logical harm to this game.
Okay, first of all, you literally made no sense.
No, I made perfect. That's your argument. You're saying people will leave the game, right? That's why it's bad for the player base. Right? And you're saying the reason this is bad is because it's bad for the player game and it'll hurt the game's growth. The game's growth being tied to the player base leaving because they don't want to pay this $1.
There are obviously going to be some illogical people in everything that is humanity, right? There are logical people who still want those illogical people to stick around because
I totally agree.
The game.
Yes.
So yes. If your argument is it affects some logical people in here, yes, everything affects some illogical people in everything because there are
no. What I'm saying is the people who are leaving are the illogical people. So me being a logical person sees that the game will decline because the illogical people will all leave.
Illogical people still watch Twitch, pay money to play it, our opponents.
Yeah.
So you basically saying like, well, we don't give a shit about. No,
I didn't say we don't give a shit about it. When did I say we don't give a shit about it? That's you putting words in my mouth. I never said we don't care about the illogical people. You're saying the illogical people will leave. That's going to cause a decline in the game, like an objective decline in the game that is real, right? I'm agreeing with you. It's a real decline in the game. And so me being a logical person, look at this and say the game's going to be worse, right? That's your death of the game thing. Yeah, okay. What I'm saying is all this still stems from the fact that a large portion of the player base, if not the majority, I would assume the majority, the vast majority, like 85% plus, being illogical about this money thing. That's still the root of it. Because if that were not the case, then the people don't leave in anywhere near that numbers, and the game is, maybe a little hurt or maybe more or less fine, and then the logical people will still stay, right? But instead, it's a whole trickle-down effect that stems from the fact that the vast majority of people are super illogical about paying a buck.
You are also, I think, too easy to put it in either a logical or illogical bucket. Take me, for example. For me, it was an on-the-fence kind of thing, right? I will never gain the momentum to play now. I don't want to pay $15 just to test it, right? And if your response is, well, just test it with 2 heroes. No, that's terrible. Because my initial ramp-up experience sucks. So I never get that anymore.
Right. I mean, that's why I don't play Battlegrounds. I don't test Battlegrounds anymore for that exact same reason. But that's because I don't want to give 2,000 of my 800,000 of gold. That's too much for me. That's the same ramp up that you're talking about. You're just talking about $15. I'm talking about 2,000 gold. So I get it. I fully get it. I just but that's.
So it's not a bucket thing. It's
sure,
it's
but that has nothing.
Gold, the money. It is now too much for me. I never ramp up. If I never play those initial games, I don't know if this meta is fun or not for me. And I don't keep playing, right? And then players in my situation don't watch Twitch. They do not share to...
Yeah, okay. So now you created a split now between what I'm going to call Hearthstone... I'm going to call players. I'm not even going to call them grinders. Hearthstone players, right? People who can get 2,000 gold versus people who have $15, right? You've created a split in that where you're saying you're someone who doesn't have $15, but you are someone who has 2,000 gold. And you're not valuing them at anywhere near the same exchange rate because you will join for 2,000 gold because you're going to only play with 4 players, with 4 options, of course, not 2 options. So you're going to pay the 2,000 gold.
Because I don't use gold, because a lot of BG players, just like arena players, don't use gold.
Yeah, exactly.
They only use it for what they use.
But
right?
how do they get the gold?
Yeah, they play.
They play the game, right? So people who play the game can generate enough gold, and then they will continue to play the game. So what Blizzard has effectively done is up the price and made it so that you can't grind to win. This is the same, like, this is like a micro scale of that Diablo Immortal argument that happens all the time between grinders and payers, where there's some fundamental difference that apparently happens when and gamers get really sensitive about this when it happens, right? I see chat. When any amount of grinding, which is time and time is money, but people don't see it that way, when any amount of playing and grinding is replaced by forcing you to pay any amount of money, even if the money is very little, right? Like, we're not talking about the actual pay to win games or it's thousands of dollars or whatever. We're talking here about money that literally every person, even broke people, can afford. There's that fundamental difference that changes where money is not time. And I'm arguing that logically money is time.
In this scenario is just you playing the game. Like, it's just you doing what you were going to do. It's not extra grinding. It is you doing what you are going to do, which is you wanting to play the game mode.
Okay, but that wasn't
Extra
the case before.
grinding,
But that's only been
I
the
agree.
case for like a little bit of time. Before, you wouldn't get any gold whatsoever by playing Battlegrounds.
What?
Like, until they put the Battle Pass in, you would not get any gold from playing Battlegrounds. For like the longest time, you got nothing from playing Battlegrounds.
We've had the battle pass for like forever now.
Okay. But what I'm saying, like, for a period of time, right, when people were still playing Battlegrounds, you just, like, you could put 2,000 in, right, to get your thing, but then it's just a payment, right, of gold.
Huh.
Right? Like, that was
Yeah.
a decent stretch of time in Battlegrounds history, and no one had a problem with it. I mean, like, nobody had a problem with it. I don't mean, like, some people had a problem with it, but most people don't have a problem with it. Literally nobody had a problem with that. This is the same exact thing, except instead of gold, we're using money. And now, most people have a problem with it, I want to say, or at least a very large percentage of vocal people, but I think really, like, most people have a problem with it. And it's not just because Blizzard had the worst explanation that made no sense whatsoever. Like, it's because fundamentally they just don't agree with this. They just don't like this, right? It, like, triggers them in the wrong way. It rubs them in the wrong way. It touches them in the wrong way. It makes them feel bad. And that, I think, is an illogical way that people have with their relationship with money and video games. And maybe it's just a relationship with money, but I think it's very specific, or like at least amplified by their relationship with money and video games. Maybe they're like this with all kinds of money in their life, but I think it triggers more amplified when it happens to be video games. And I'm just saying, like, maybe it's because people play video games when they're little, right? And they have no money. And now that they have to pay money, like, it's just, as long as it's not in the model that they're used to growing up, it, like, feels weird and it, like, ruins some of, like, that nostalgia or immersion or something that they like about the game. But it's something that's feelings based. It's not something that's tangible. Because your barrier of entry argument, I totally buy. But I feel it with gold. And the only difference between gold and money is time.
So here's where I think you are kind of missing the point, because it is not just they had this, now it's being taken away and the money is very little, and these people, by your words, illogically, do not want to pay this very little amount of money, which we agree with. It is very little. I think that this is something that really captures the decline and the fear from the BG audience, and you see it in the past many months, if not like more than a year, in terms of content, in terms of balance, in terms of holy shit, TFT is doing super well, BG's isn't doing that well. I know a lot of streamers are a little bit worried about the future BGs as well. They tried to make a competitive BGs, Lobbying Legends.
Mm-hmm.
There are some complaints about that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it is the format of it, whether it is the length of it, whether it is currently enough to kind of show um who is actually the best, which is always a problem with Hearthstone. But this decision, I think people, like, it's never always it's never like a, oh, we will complain exactly the proportion of something that has happened, right? It is, some things capture it more. But I don't think that this is capturing it from nothingness, from illogical, oh, it must be from when they were young and like how they were used to games. I think there is a lot here based on what has been happening and how BGs has been declining for a long time. So
Okay, so
That's
you're saying they're angry not because they're being charged a dollar, they're angry at BGs in general, and they don't want to be charged a dollar while BGs is going poorly.
I think that's a lot of it.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fine. But then that has very little to do with the money. And I don't fully buy that because you could do a lot of crap with BGs and you wouldn't get this reaction if you aren't charging people a buck. Do you buy that argument?
What argument?
Oh, sorry. Do you buy this? Do you think I'm right in that you could do a lot of bad things to BG and people will complain significantly less loudly if you don't charge them a buck?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. The amplifying, right? Like you're not amplifying from nothing, right? 1,000 times zero is still zero. You're amplifying something, but the amplification, the illogical amplification, is the money. Like you're saying it's never 1-to-1 proportion. It's all built up. I'm saying it's not even that it's all built up. Let's say you built up 50 points of things you're disappointed on. You may complain 50, you may complain 100, but if you charge me a buck, you're going to complain 5,000. That's what I'm saying.
And I think what it is though is it's charging anything while the game is in such a some people might disagree, some people might say it's not enough, but like while it is in stagnation, decline, however you want to call it, they see it as a point of no return.
I
Not like,
mean,
oh, it'll never go back. It is a, oh man, we're declining. They are putting up this model. If you also look at games in history, like when this stuff happens, this isn't like the best of signs.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the best of signs because it's the game company saying, "Hey, we need money," which means things aren't going well. You think things are going poorly on the game development side in terms of like what they're putting out? If they're coming to you and saying, "Hey, we need more money to run our game," things are not going well up in corporate either. People are like, "Oh, Blizzard's making so much money, making so much whatever." This is not the sign of confidence from Blizzard. Not just in their product, but it's not a confident sign in their business model in general. Like, you don't hear this at all with Diablo Immortal, by the way, from Blizzard. Diablo Immortal, Blizzard has a very confident business model. It is not even making them as much money as they thought it would, but the business model is just that good. So every time they speak, it's in defense of the business model. It gives a little to the players, but the main core of the business model stays intact. They defend it. They're not really expanding too much upon it yet. They're going with it. And the Diablo Immortal business model is not like just a normal gotcha pay to win mobile game business model. They like do some weird tweaks to it, and they're very like confident about it, at least so far. And you don't get that from like that's not what you like. If this were the case with the Hearthstone business model, none of this would be happening. None of this would be happening. And that's because the Hearthstone model, the Hearthstone business model, which was a good business model 8 years ago, is a terrible business model today. So they have to do something. And the strategy they went with is to do the smallest things possible from an economic perspective while creating the biggest sea change. Because if they just came out here and instead of charging 15 bucks or whatever, they said we're going to charge you 60 bucks. It's not going to be 4 times the amount of outrage. It's going to be like plus 50% the amount of outrage at most. And they would get a lot more money. Because there's probably not that many people that are willing to pay a buck, but not willing to pay 3 or 4 for
You
this
know
game.
what? Our listeners out there should be glad you're not making those decisions. For those of you who are like, you know what, I'm still happy to pay the $15. Be glad you're not paying 60. But that's where we stand right now. BG's is at a crossroads. I think a lot of people are worried. They were worried, and this just makes them even more worried, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because BG's is one of those things as well where, and I think part of the worry is that your personal enjoyment of BGs is also contingent on a lot of other people tryharding and enjoying BGs, even if you are not with the like. if a lot of the stuff doesn't affect you, it's kind of like an MMO. You want to be on a healthy server. Now, most of the time, 99.99999% of the server doesn't interact with you, right? Nothing touches you. It's just you with some NPCs and then maybe like some other players that you're partying with or whatever. And for BGs, it's the people that you're facing right now, the people that are like close to your MMR that you might be like competing with, but you do need a strong ecosystem there. That's the only way that this works, and it's part of the reason that like Artifact died, right? Artifact died and plummeted because it didn't have the player base, and then everybody left,
Mm-hmm.
like just dropped. So it's an interesting conversation that we're having because, and what happened this week, I think, is really interesting because where I fell on it is I think at the end of the day, this is super disappointing. It's unfortunate, but I think Brian Kibler is 100% correct in that it can be true. Like that this is a very fair amount of money if you break it down,
I don't
but
think
it
this is
is
fair. I think
also
they should pay more.
sure. Um, you know what I mean when I say fair. It is a very fair amount of money to pay for something that can give you that much entertainment, but and still at the end of the day, universally a lot of people see this as a bad
Mm-hmm.
decision, and I think those two ideas can jive.
Yeah.
Like they
I
can
think they're
both
both
be true.
true. I think they are
Yeah.
both true. I think they're 100% both true.
Yeah.
And that's just because people are being the people who love video games and their treatment of video games is terrible. Like, and it's sad. It's sad as someone who loves video games to see how other people who love video games treat video games. Um, like it's one thing to be annoyed at Diablo Immortal, which is literally a pay-to-win game, because that's a different type of game, right? Like the payment structure actually affects every part of the game. Like if you don't want to play a pay-to-win game, you're not going to enjoy playing a pay-to-win game. Like it's a different kind of game, and they just basically made a Diablo game that was not for you and that you will not enjoy. So like I understand, you know, people opting out of that experience and were being mad that they spent resources on a game that, you know, most people could never play and enjoy. Like I get that, but charging $1 a week to play your game, being annoyed at that, and just take a good look at yourself in the mirror and say, do I actually enjoy this game? Maybe you don't. Like it is entirely possible you don't actually enjoy this game, but if you do, I don't care if it's $2 an hour. I mean, an hour. I don't care if it's $2 a week. I don't even really care if it's $2 an hour. But $2 a week, $3 a week, $4 a week, $5 a week. Are any of those unreasonable amounts to charge? I'm not saying would any of them cause a max exodus of 99% of the player base. I think all of them would cause a mass exodus of some sort. And the more that you charge, the more the player base will leave, obviously. But I'm saying, are any of them unreasonable? I don't want to talk about fairness. I don't know how you talk about fairness in capitalism. But are any of them an unreasonable amount for a consumer to pay for entertainment? And the answer is no. That's the objective answer. The objective answer is no. It is not unreasonable for you to pay $1 a week, $5 a week if you play the game any amount, right? Like maybe if you're super casual and you pick up the game like once a week and play an hour, you know, $5 isn't worth it. Fine. Maybe even $1 isn't worth it to you, maybe. But if you're a regular-ish player, they went with under $1 a week. Come on. Come on. This is not about money in terms of the dollar amount. This is about money as a concept. And I disagree with money as a concept. I think money is just a number, just like time. And I think they're all interchangeable. But people value money as a concept. And that's illogical. And I will, I think I'm just 100% objectively right about this. And everything else that we're layering in is just fancier and fancier ways of saying feelings.
All right. Anyways,
yeah.
that's that. I am definitely worried about BGs.
I mean, I'm worried about
once
BGs
again,
too, but like not
yeah.
because of the money thing. I mean, I'm worried about that too, and it's just the messaging, and even beyond the messaging, just that decision to only charge like $15 for a thing, but to charge at all, like it's a terrible intersection of the worst things you could do, right? Like, if you're going to make it money only, at least charge a lot. The people that pay are going to pay. If you're not like, more importantly, if you know that all your player base is going to leave, maybe don't try to hard charge the money like, as you have been doing in the past, because you've clearly thought this through before you came to a decision, and now things are so desperately bad that you had to pull this move out that you know they had to have known this was going to be taken poorly, like really poorly. It's bad. It's bad for BGs right now. I don't disagree with that at all. Someone in chat keeps asking me repeatedly, and so I'll actually answer this, even though I normally don't answer questions directly from chat on the Lightforge podcast. How much would you still play Arena for if they charged you? And my answer is probably like, how much do they charge you for a run right now? Like $2, $3? That seems fine. $5 seems fine. 20 maybe too much. But below that, I would I think I would still pay it. But arena runs for me go longer than for most people, right? So I'm looking at it as a per hour kind of entertainment thing. An arena run for me, I take forever to draft. I play whatever. It's usually like 2 or 3 hours. And how much do I pay for 2 to 3 hours of entertainment? Yeah, at least $10. Maybe not 20. I like arena a lot though, so maybe 20. So you're not going to price me out with any reasonable pricing. It would have to be a pay-to-win system to price me out, right? Like, I enjoy Diablo Immortal a lot too. I'm not dropping $1,000 in the game. Definitely not dropping $10,000. But you want to charge me $1 an hour for Diablo Immortal? Sure. You know, I'll go $5 an hour. I haven't put anywhere near that much money in, but if they wanted to actually charge me that to play the game, and that is because, one, I actually have disposable income, I am not broke, and two, is just how much you pay for entertainment. That's a reasonable amount to pay for entertainment that you really enjoy. And that is the amount that you pay for a lot of other entertainment, and you just don't do it for video games. And for me, I love video games at least twice as much as I love the next form of entertainment. Someone in chat saying Auto is not understanding the average HS player. I'm not talking about the average HS player. This was a personal question directed to me that I'm answering personally, of how much I would pay to play the arena. Like, this is not, like, I think people will run for the hills if you charge even 1 cent. Because people are extremely illogical with money in video games. That was my whole rant. Like, I don't know, like, you gotta listen. I'm actually repeating myself a lot too, so you don't even have to listen to every word. Like every 3 words and you'll get the idea. Like, I think if you charge 1 cent per arena run, the percent of people playing arena, which is really low already, is going to plummet by at least 75%. I strongly believe that is a fact. I also think that in no world would it be unreasonable to charge people 1 cent to play the arena. And that those 75% of the people that currently play arena that will be turned away by being charged 1 cent are completely illogical. And I think you see this at BGs pretty well, right? Because you're being charged $1 a week. And the reaction's been terrible. Like, just more and more proof, in my book, that video games players and money are just, they do not mix well. They are extremely illogical, and it's just a terrible consumer base to have if you're in that business. Because the Diablo Immortal hate was huge, but at least Diablo Immortal was pushing the envelope as much as it can, right? Like, if you're talking slippery slope, I don't even think Diablo Immortal is that much of a slippery slope because it's not like inventing new stuff. But yeah, it is pushing the amount that you can spend on a game that is a major release. It is. But Battlegrounds? Oh my god. You are moving the smallest increment, as Kibler put it. And the reaction is not as bad as Diablo Immortal, but way closer to that than should be.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Whatever your thoughts are, feel free to share. Thank you.
All right. We'll be back next week to talk more stuff. Hopefully there's some more changes that happens. I'm not too confident that that's going to happen, but we'll see. Hopefully there'll be an adjustment. The game could definitely benefit from one in the arena, and it wouldn't be like a hard thing to do. So I don't know what more data they need or what more reactions. Universally hating the mage location and Deathborn. Universal hatred. No one likes it. Like, why? Why is it still around? It's also the top class. Come on, make a change. All right, until next week, this is abou.
This is Merps. See ya, guys.